Welcome to EIPIP Meeting 88. We have shared agenda in chat, which is issue number 257 on EIPIP GitHub repository. Thank you everyone for joining. We will go ahead and start with our agenda item. And the first one here is to discuss open issues and PRs. We will also discuss issues from the past that are ongoing discussion. We'll have a look at the monthly insight, a brief of EIP editing office hour, and anything else anyone would like to share or discuss today. So starting with the very first item, under which we have the first one listed here is placing a warning on ERC20. I know this was recommended by Sam Wilson. Sam, if you would like to provide an overview and what this is all about.
Sure. I wouldn't say I'm recommending this, but I'm the one who put it on the agenda. So there is a developer, Dexaran, that is annoyed that people keep losing money with ERC20s, and they're asking us to put a warning on ERC20 to tell people that it doesn't require that the destination of a transfer can actually accept ERC20 tokens. So this is fixed in a bunch of newer proposals, but people keep deploying ERC20s and people keep losing money. My personal view on this is that we shouldn't modify ERC20, and if people want to use a better standard, they can, but I wanted to bring it up here because I said I would.
Yeah, I noticed he was also like trying to get in touch with the foundation through us and things like that. Yeah, I think you sort of let him know that he was talking to the wrong people, but he should be talking to core devs and contacting the foundation directly with some of these issues. And of course, ERC20 and anything final is immutable. So I think that's that. We don't. I guess he could open a new EIP at the informative level to tell people about this.
All right.
So my view on this is that ERC20 is definitely has that caveat, and that is by design. Finding the right place to show the warning is something that I felt slightly leaning towards in favor of. But I also think in a larger scope, in a larger context, we should start to think about how do we allow supersedes, or how do we allow newer best practice? For example, like the internet standards like RFCs, they will say this RFC is superseded by the other one. And also they will have a number for best practices. So they will actually refer to best practices in those cases. And for standards such important like the ERC20, maybe it's a good place and good example for us to discuss EIP editors and ERC editors group as a whole. How do we harness and curate this practice of continuing to improve? We've seen this. We also seen the caveats in how the approval was made, right? Initially, ERC20 was designed to set a specific approval limit. However, most of the exchanges, the DEX, require a very, very high or almost unlimited approval when they actually use that, like Uniswap permit 2. Those are what we see in practice, and then I think of a good starting point for us to discuss how do we talk about improvement of standards and how do we direct people to use newer and better backward compatible version. So that's my view. I'm
Dana?
done talking.
Yeah, thanks for that. I tend to agree that some form of update or errata should coexist with the immutability of a final one. I think I can't remember where, but I think I offhandedly said, like on an East Magician's thread or something, that maybe when something goes final, an author should be able to say, like, please see this later EIP, informational EIP that some of us also wrote this EIP, sort of like best practices, like you mentioned, like linking to a later document that nuances it or caveats it or gives implementation guidance or something. Because like supersession sort of implies a technical thing being replaced by a newer technical thing with legacy support for what is superseding, but like just a newer document that just describes problems not foreseen at the time it went final is a different beast, you know? It's not a supersession, it's just sort of a please see this later document as well from the author.
Dana?
Yeah, I think there's like two issues here. Should these be allowed in general, and in this one in particular, should it be allowed? I think there needs to be some sort of standards. I think I'm personally opposed to putting a warning on ERC20 for this because it amounts to user error. And I think that should be considered part of the warning. One that I could get behind was, let's say, hypothetically, there's a break for the Blake2 hash function. That, something is cryptographically broken, that's worthy of a warning on an ERC or an EIP. But something that is, practice and use, I don't think raises to the level of putting a warning sticker on there.
So one of the big problems with these kind of warnings and additional notices, and I think that's one of the reasons we don't have them so far, is that who has the authority to make these claims? So like, let's say that, I don't know, Blake 2 is broken. How do we verify that it's broken? How do we verify that adding that information is, correct? And maybe for less black and white things like this ERC20, there are, fungible token standards that don't let you send the tokens to contracts that don't support it. So they fix that whole class of user errors. But, I'm with you on this one, Dana, where I don't think we should put a warning on it because, it's like mailing money to an address that doesn't exist. You don't put that warning on the postal service, right? Like, so yeah, basically I just don't want EIP editors to have the power to determine whether or not something is worthy of a warning. So we should just not have them at all. It's kind of my thought.
I think you bring up a good point, and the center of it is who has the authority. And I think I'm with you on that, in that ERC editors are probably not the best one to have that authority. Whether to put that consideration somewhere to allow readers to be more cautious or have an educated approach to it is, I think, a separate story about where the authority, who the authority who has the authority. Maybe author has the authority, or maybe we can have a social consensus to allow that to happen. And even if it's a warning, I'm not saying like on top of it should be a warning. I'm more in my mental model, I'm more thinking of maybe it should happen in the consideration. I don't know if it's a security consideration, but this is something pretty new to a lot of people. The metaphor of mailing an envelope to an empty address is a good metaphor, but a lot of people doesn't yet have established that kind of mindset yet. So my view on that is, if people were rewriting ERC from day one, And if there is a consideration section, maybe in the consideration section, they should mention that not all addresses by Ethereum design has the ability to send back or to resend another ERC20. That's different from the address that doesn't exist. The USPS will rebond address, or if it's an empty house, some people can go in there and claim it. And by the design of Ethereum at the moment, right now, an address is generated by a lot of hashes, and then if it doesn't exist, then it doesn't exist, right? So for contract, it's hashes. For EOAs, it's the public key. So that's the difference between the empty address metaphor versus the skin scenario. I'm done talking.
Well, something okay. I mean, I think there's, I agree that a general purpose warning put there by some vague collective is not good. I was kind of assuming that a RADA authority would only apply with the change controllers on the EIP. So like, if one or more authors in the EIP, whoever is listed as the change controller can change, ideally after it becomes final as well, and whoever sort of like speaks, whoever could still update it if it wasn't final, could theoretically add some kind of errata or BIS. I'm sort of imagining that just as like a generally useful thing. The Blake 2 example is good because if you, for instance, if you wrote an EIP that was like a pre-compile for a specific signing function, or cryptography is sort of always supersedable or unforeseen complications or best practices come up later after something goes final, the author should be able to say, please see this later EIP. And it isn't really appropriate for that author to say, Blake 2 is definitively dead, we can't use it anymore. They could only say, look at this other document. And in that other document, it could argue that maybe it's dead according to some criteria, but it's like just pointing to a later document, not, anything more substantive. That was sort of like my idea of the errata thing. And in that sense, also coming back to the specific case, if this person seems like they're maybe on something of a crusade, and like, it seems like they're trying to prove a point about the governance or the documentation or something. So like, in a way, the politest thing to do, if there was an errata option available to authors of final EIPs, we could tell the person, hey, you don't keep bothering us, don't keep bothering Ethereum Foundation. The only person who could point to updated guidance would be the authors of ERC20. Like, for better or for worse. Maybe that's mean to them, but I don't know. Just the thought.
So I think something that we could probably do today would be PR against ERC20, updating the security considerations section with a note, getting it approved by the author. I think that would be doable. I think that could fall under errata or clarifications.
So this, yeah, Greg.
I just assumed, that adding any even non-normative text to it, to a final EIP was breaking the immutability. I didn't even know that was an option. I was assuming you could only point towards a later EIP as it ask the authors to make another EIP.
Greg, you were saying something?
Greg, you are muted.
Okay, there's the button. Final is final, and errata are for the case where the EIP actually fails to describe the actual intended normative behavior. So that this is what ERC20 does normatively. For all I know, there's applications out there that actually use this behavior for a purpose. So there's no point to going in and changing these things. There are other token standards you can use if you don't like this behavior. And this person is quite free to write an informative EIP describing this problem and making these warnings. And he's free in a bigger sense to create his own group, to start some process of going through things and starting a process for finding these problems and creating EIP to report them, maybe a living EIP. We just don't have a process for this, and it's not clear that it's the editor's problem to start keeping track of ways that you can get in trouble using various standards. There's any number of ways to get in trouble with Ethereum and lose lots of money. So there's nothing wrong with the ERC-20 that needs to be fixed here. It's just what it is.
I would agree to that. Like there could be proposals which are superseding, but supersede is no more status for Ethereum improvement proposal. So perhaps we can, as Greg suggested, maybe suggest the user to come up with another proposal which may fix an informational proposal if that helps. So they can share more information about that. And also Sam suggested to have a PR against ERC-20. I don't know what is the conclusion here, like what is the recommended action?
Greg pretty much convinced me that that's a bad idea. So I think the recommended action is we do nothing, and they can tell people as much as they want that ERC-20 is bad.
Right. I suppose the author is also trying to talk about ERC-223, which according to the proposal may be referring to some of the issues that he is claiming to be there with the ERC-20. So if people are interested, they can also take a look at proposal ERC-223, which is currently in the last call, and the deadline is September 3rd. I think with that, the conclusion for this item is editors may not be responsible of keeping track of adding warnings to proposals which are already into the final status, and the user can come up with informational EIP and share the information at various levels. Moving on to, thank you, Sam. Moving on to the next item here, which is update EIP1, remove requires headers. I suppose this is initially opened by PandaPeep, but I suppose some mentioned that we should be discussing it over here.
Yeah, so Panda's been having an effort to cite, to have EIP show up in Google Scholar. And one of the things you need to do to have that happen is have a real bibliography. This is one step towards that, where Panda wants to remove the requires header and instead generate the bibliography from links to EIPs in the proposal itself. So we would no longer have the distinction between non-normative and normative EIP references. They'd all just be regular links.
Is this a requirement for bibliography to be generated?
No.
Can we have that and maybe touch the removing requires later down the road? I know that in some places we previously strictly enforces what goes into the requires is normative links. And if we have I was not a big fan of that requirement, but if we have mandated that in the past, maybe that needs to be taken into consideration when we remove this altogether.
So you're saying you'd like to see the bibliography stuff before we remove the requires header, or?
I was saying that it seems the original proposal was to introduce bibliography section. It seems to me, based on your understanding and my understanding, having a requires doesn't block generating bibliography. So there's no enough justification to support removing requires at this moment.
Anyone else has any thought on this one?
Yeah, I agree with Victor there. I've proposed a reference section. And not all of the links in a reference section have to be up to date in the way that the require section does need to track what's normative at a given time. So I think they serve independent purposes, and I wouldn't want to try to generate the require system automatically.
I would appreciate if either Victor or Greg may add a comment to this pull request. That might be helpful because Panda is not on the call, although the recording will be made available, but that would help future discussion on this PR.
I can help put down if, yeah.
Very well. Anything else on this one? Greg, I am wondering if your hand is raised for this one or from the earlier. Okay, cool. Moving on to the next one is adding numbering guideline. I think this PR is also created by Panda PEEP last month with respect to how we are changing EIP numbering, I suppose. The PR number here is 7388. Any comments on that? This seems to be approved by Sam. And okay, yeah, Mike Azalto also mentioned it for another PR. Yeah, any thoughts by editors on this one?
Yeah, I think it's good to update this since we did change how we number stuff. So
this just requires merging, nothing else to be done. Cool. So we can consider this as approved and will be merged unless anyone else has any comments to add on the PR directly, if not here. Moving on to the next one is about semi-stagnation of the last call EIPs. This was earlier discussed in one of the EIPIP meetings about proposals standing in last call for a longer duration of time. I believe at the time, most of the editors were in agreement that this is fair to move the proposal into the stagnant status. Anyone opposes to this PR?
So hang on, let me see this one. This so this will just say that we can move things from last call into stagnant.
That's right, and with the help of bot.
I mean, I feel like we should just move them forward for the authors, but maybe we shouldn't. I don't know.
So what happens? What happens here is like if the PR is not raised, if the PR is sitting, then we get a warning to the author. But if the author forgets to create a PR, there is no warning sent to the author.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with this. It'll just move it into stagnant, which I think is fine.
Okay. Yeah, the idea is the bot will move it to stagnant, and the moment the bot will make it to the stagnant, it will obviously create a PR, and that will automatically generate a message to the author that this proposal, this EIP is being moved to stagnant. If he or she wants to not stagnant that proposal, they can come up with a PR to move it to the final.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. So let's mark this as approved as well. The PR number is 7346.
I felt this is another example of problem with EIP ownership. The problem happens when authors contribute to the point when they stop getting actively engaged. Do they still own the EIP, or does the community or in any group owns the community? This come up in our previous conversation of the remove whether to add a warning to ERC20. The author was no longer very active in this particular ERCs, and then also in this case of when EIP of last call losses authors to move it to final. So maybe in the future we can discuss about how do we handle or how do we help in this case, in those cases, in an ownership perspective.
Sounds good. Moving on to the next one here on the agenda is add adaptable field. The PR number is 5533. I think it was added by Sam Wilson.
Yeah, I thought we had decided that we weren't doing this.
Still ownership problem?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we need to close this PR.
I think Panda actually bumped it up and we've opened it. So Panda was not here.
Okay. In that case, maybe if we can drop a comment that we decided to close this one, and we can take any further discussion on the Discord.
Yeah, and Sam already commented.
Perfect. The next one here is add NIST as permitted origin for a reference for external link.
So this would allow linking to CVEs, which I think might be kind of nice, and we have an author asking for it. I just wanted to know if anybody had objections to that before I wrote up the EIP for it, or the PR rather.
Yes, we should be able to let Wade link to CVE. I'm in favor of that.
All right, I'm not hearing any objections, so I'll put it on my to-do list.
Just to clarify, so for this particular item, people think that it would be a good idea to come up with an EIP, and Sam would be taking care of that.
Yep.
Perfect. The last one under this section is update EIP 5069, replace handbook with charter. So in the last meeting of EIPIP, we discussed that the proposal, the charter shared by Sam should be in two parts. Some updates goes to EIP 1 and some updates goes to EIP 5069. I see a big overhaul here. The proposal is being moved from informational to meta, and a lot of things are being changed. The pull request number is 7468. I think Sam is looking for some last feedback if people have any before this could be merged.
I'm generally in favor of that direction. Procedure-wise, Sam, what do you think if we change the content and keep them informational, at least for a amount of time, like a few months, for the general public, editors, authors, and everyone to get familiar with them before moving them to Meta. The reason being that moving to Meta is enforceable. And for important document like this, it seems we need more, like if we are imposing a review, last call, final for a technical document, I think we should also have a way for people to know that something is coming up, it's important, and if we want to adopt them, there is a time for you to voice your feedback in general public. In general public, this is because the editing itself is still in draft, and it has not been published to be viewed by a lot of people. It's currently only editors are involved.
Well, this is a governance decision for ourselves, so I don't know if it needs to be like open to everybody, but
I
could be
think ourselves
curious.
refer to editors and authors. I'm under that impression because it impacted how authors are being treated in the future down the road.
So what would be the externally visible changes that authors would see if we adopted this?
I
Just trying
think
to
we should, I think at least a better way is to publish it as an informational, and then have a PR standing there to say, hey, in a few, but long number of weeks that we're moving it to Meta, enforcing it, and you better respond by it. And then also, I think it's worthy of bumping up the FEM threads, that this is turning from informational to Meta.
I can do it as a different EIP if that makes it better, like, and just go through the process.
That will work. Currently, no one is engaging in the EIP editor handbook thread, and if we're turning it to charter, which is I think I'm in favor of, that it makes it enforceable, and then people should really care.
I'm just really not seeing what other people need to care about for this. It's not going to make any differences for people outside the EIP editor group. Like, there's no topic groups in here anymore. It's literally just like writing down our decision-making process.
Okay, I hear that you said there's no point notifying outside of EIP editor groups because you think this is a decision make among ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. I don't understand what like like why do we need input from people who are not editors on this?
I don't know, Dana, what's your view? Dana, I guess maybe providing a perspective.
So when you're working with a system, it's nice to know how you expect it to work, although this would be law, and how these meetings actually work as case law, and they are quite different. So that is a point of frustration, is that it's a random number generator when someone who is not an editor interacts with the system. I'm kind of disappointed now to hear the topic groups are out of this. Are they out in general, or are they just out of this specific ERC?
They're just out of it until there's still some finer points that we want to work on. So we're just getting this in first, and then we're going to add topic groups or working groups.
I mean,
shortly.
from an outsider perspective, when the outsiders don't have any input and they watch what should have been an agreed upon thing that was agreed in principle 3 weeks ago get spinned over and over, they lose a lot of faith. So that's a perspective as an outsider.
I think what I hear Daniel says is that it will, if we let outsiders give us feedback on this and give them some time, it will allow us to accumulate more faithful credit from them. If we don't, then we lose the chance to get their credit, to improve our credibility by soliciting outside feedback. Is that a good understanding of your perspective?
Well, I mean, even if you get the outside feedback, will it speed up the process of actually coming to a decision and consensus? Because anything that slows down that process is going to cost credibility.
So when they,
Which-
yeah, please, Greg, go ahead.
I'm sorry, which do you want? That things go really fast, or that the community has time to let us know that this is a charter for a group that they actually want to serve them in the ways that we want to serve them?
What we want is certainty. It's like a court of law. You want certainty. You don't want unpredictability.
But we also, I do think we want feedback from the community, so that they understand we are the editors and this is what we are proposing to do. We can reject the feedback, but it would be good to have that feedback. And we've been around long enough that taking a bit of time to try and get things right is, I don't think, a big problem.
All right. So I'm hearing that you guys want me to have a last call type period for this where we can get feedback from the community. And I'm also hearing that Dano is upset that it's taking a very long time and that we aren't making any decisions. Is that a reasonable summary of everybody's stances?
It's not that it's taken a long time. It's that 3 weeks ago, there's one decision, and then all of a sudden it's just thrown up in the air like 52 card pickup. So that's my personal perspective. I'm not speaking for all core devs in this regard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to iterate it here, proposal which are moved as living. There are very limited proposals which are in living status. That already provides this flexibility to make changes in future. That's the reason why we do not have this last call thing added for proposals which are in living statuses. However, I find it as a good idea to have it publicized. Reliving the FEM discussion thread is a good suggestion. We can perhaps make use of that. But as per my understanding, we do not necessarily wait for another 14 days for this to be settled down. So if people are okay, we can perhaps keep this PR open for another 7 days or so. And maybe we can have discussion thread ignited again on FAM about this change coming up. Would that be a fair resolution, that we are coming to a decision, we are going towards getting this certainty, and we are not waiting for a very long time? So
I think I'm just more disappointed that it was communicated to me that there was a consensus and they were going forward, and that all of a sudden everything's on the table again. So that's where a lot of my frustrations come from.
Yeah, I understand that, but I don't think we'll be moving in that direction. We are not going back. The decision is still there. We are just trying to make sure the decision is added and being reflected in the document so people can follow and refer it in future. So I see a couple of hands up by the editors here. So just as a summary, we can have this pull request open for next 7 days. And after that, if Sam will change from draft to a real PR, that would be merged by bot. So anyone having any thoughts, try to come up before that.
Pooja, I think I would personally suggest that we publish it as opposed to merged as opposed of keeping it as a draft PR, because not many people will be able to see that. And also publishing it allows search engine to pick it up, allows much more notification to kick off. So what I would suggest alternatively, we introduce all the change, publish it, except for the type being informational rather than meta. And in a few weeks, we make another pull request to move it from informational to meta to start enforcing it. I want to know what people think about of this approach instead.
My quick question here. I know the original author is Sam, Panda, and me, and Sam has created the PR. What can be done that Bart does not merge it if Sam moves it to draft?
Well, as long as I keep it in draft, it won't merge it. That's why I keep it in draft.
Yeah, but I think Victor is suggesting that we should make it like as a normal PR so people can see it and it should be publicized.
Yeah, I actually should merge it and publish it as an informational before we start enforcing
Okay.
it in the meta. And maybe we should drop a line in the document says this is going into meta if no objection, like in a time that we agree, in a timeline that we agree upon.
Yes, Greg?
I'm confused. Wouldn't this be better as a living document?
Yeah,
we-
it'll be living in the meta category.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah,
So
if we go ahead and
that-
publish it, if we go ahead and publish it, and it will have a discussions to link, so any discussion on it can continue. And as it moves to living, changes can be made on the basis of the discussion. And I think that takes care of what I'm hearing.
So the idea here is the status is going to be living. It is not changing. That one thing that is changing is category and type. Earlier it was informational, and now we are talking about moving it to meta.
All right, so just to reiterate one final time, my understanding of the plan is change the PR from a meta to informational so that there will no longer be a status update, then merge the PR, and then in 2 weeks from today on the next EIPIP call, we can ratify make this our government's process. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, except for 2 weeks may be too short for people to give this kind of feedback, but I'm okay if it's 2 weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks is generally the last call period. Even if we are not following it formally, the last call period, informally, it is being followed here. So,
and this will be, I think, I don't know, week 5 or week 6 that the proposal's been circulating, at least semi-publicly. So, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Perfect.
Perfect. So 7468 with the status, with the type change back to informational, the PR should be good to be merged. And in the next meeting, we can discuss further changing from informational to meta. The next one here is a set of proposals for which are already into final status. Number one is 1820. The PR is 7506. I think all of them are created by Sam, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you can share the purpose of having this changes to already final proposals.
So these are 7506 and 7505. Yeah, okay. So these two are somebody put raw HTML in their proposal, and they just look like it's just an unnecessary HTML tag. So I just want to remove it for formatting purposes.
Anyone has any objection? So the other PR 7505 is also same or similar, right?
Exactly. It's just removing
Okay.
just pre-tags.
Okay. So maybe editors can take a look, and if anyone has any objection, drop a comment over there. Otherwise, this PR should be good to be merged in next 2 weeks, if not before that. The
One
last
quick
one.
question.
Yes.
Hey Sam, did you put in like how long does electing keeper how often do we elect keeper?
It's
And
whenever anybody asks for it. So any editor can be like, I would like to elect a keeper, and then an election starts.
Oh, okay. Oh, anyone at any time can call for a keeper. Okay. Agree upon. Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, he probably went back to sleep.
I'm sorry about that. The next one here is PR number 6860. It is about a proposal which is already in final. Number is 4804. I think there were some suggestions, review suggestions by Sam, and author has responded to that. I do not see any change in the code here. But yeah, I wonder if people are generally okay to get this PR merged because it's been a while it is sitting over there.
So I'm still, I think, in the camp of not updating this, but yeah, I guess we can read this and comment on it.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Moving on to the item number 2. Okay, we have 8 minutes left. Let's try to move as fast as possible. Discussion continued or updates from the past meeting. It is about EIP, ERC GitHub repository split. I think we discussed part of it, in fact, more of it in the earlier discussion. Yes, Dano, if you have to add anything on this topic.
The EIP 7329, you asked me to put in review with all core devs. Should it be moved to last call now? It's the PR informational meta giving the rationale for the split.
Yeah, that could be done anytime.
Yeah, go
Okay,
for it.
I'll move it in the last call for 2 weeks from today.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think we are good with all other decisions. The decisions were to move part of it in one and part of it in the EIP editor's charter book. Yes, Greg, please go ahead.
Yeah, Sam and I discussed this some, and there's just an editing merge issue as EIP 1 has changed enough that the merge can't happen. And there's what we want to happen is to be sure that the core devs can keep track of their own statuses. We don't want to force them into that there must be a review period, there must be a last call period. They have their own workflow and they need to put that in the document. And I think Sam may remember better. The choice was whether to just let the core devs use the existing status field for that purpose, or whether to introduce basically a working group preamble that the working groups, and initially the only working group we have is the core devs, that the core devs can use that preamble in any way that they want, tracking status, tracking anything else that they want to track in the document. And so that was the one thing we needed to settle. And the other was a reference section, what we needed to go in there, distinctions on informative and normative links. I don't think that all got settled. But the first one I know Dano had a strong interest in, and I'd like to hear back from Dano on that sort of choice.
So my understanding was we split this entirely in two. The split is separate from all other governance issues, whether we use headers or not. And those moved into discussion of what's going on with the new topic groups and with the EIP editor preamble. I was hoping we could talk about topic groups this week, because I was hoping that the new charter would have been resolved by now. And I think that we can't really talk about those details until after the charter is complete and set those standards. And because the agreement that I remember from all core devs and from 2 weeks ago was the split is completely separate from governance issues.
The split's happening.
Yep, the split's happening.
That's where the files go in the repo. The question is, we still currently have a status field and a defined workflow for what goes in the status field.
And those are governance issues, and those can be resolved once the charter's done.
We pretty much are done with the charter. That we're going to put it up for some comments, but I don't expect any substantive changes there.
Okay.
So what we broke out of that was the working groups, because the question Sam and I ran into was simply, do we give the core devs the status field itself, or do we give the core devs their own preamble to keep track of their own governance?
I'm in favor of reducing the scope of core governance, so letting the topic groups decide their own status thing is in line with that general principle, that the central group should be doing less and less and giving more and more power to the topic groups. So I would prefer that core devs get to do what we want with the status groups. You could say like, well, you need to categorize these into mutable and immutable states. That would be fine. And propose a process for resurrecting abandoned and rejected stuff. But I would very much prefer that topic groups get full control of their status.
Yeah, I think Greg's proposal is whether let me sum this up, Greg, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you wanted to have two fields, one that was for editorial status and one that's for whatever the working group wants to use for their progress tracking.
Right.
And the proposal I recall seeing at one point had the mutable and immutable fields, and you would just map the topic group ones to an editorial status from that. And that would be the task for the topic groups, is to establish what that mapping is. Because the real concern about editorial status is it mutable or not?
Not really. I don't think. It's up to the working groups if mutable and immutable is even a concept for them. From the editor's point of view, the statuses that really matter are draft, final. And final doesn't really matter to us until after an upgrade, really. If the editors want to make it go final before an upgrade, fine, but we're not concerned.
Okay. So if instead of providing a list of states that map to mutable and immutable, if the topic groups map their statuses to a draft status and a final status, then we don't need the editor status, because we can map it into the topic group's workflow.
Right. Everything in between draft and final is up to the core devs. And the question is simply, do we let the core devs use the existing status field, or do we give the core devs their own preamble? In the header of the document, there's an extra preamble that a working group can use to put any fields whatsoever that they need.
Yeah, and I just want the status field. I don't want two status fields. So let the topic groups control status.
And if you want to add other headers, then what?
You can add other headers per topic group. But to have like a header that means two different things between core governance and topic group governance, I think is the sort of friction that'll result in problems.
Yeah, I think so the way I had originally written this up is the first 7 fields I think were fixed, and that was like the date it was created, the authors who can edit the document, what topic group it belongs to, and there's a few of these fixed ones, but then anything after those first n number of them would be totally up to the topic group.
Okay. What I was seeing on the status field is that from the editor's point of view, it goes to draft and it stays draft until it's final. From our point of view, it's a draft and it's subject to change all along. From the core dev's point of view, it's going through a sequence of changes that the editors don't need to care about. And while things are, and so I don't know that it's very confusing, and it's, I think, helpful for the editors to know that. And it's pretty much just a tooling issue as to how that gets displayed on on the what is it, EIPs.ethereum. It just creates a separation of responsibilities. So we're not having to coordinate at all on that.
So what if the topic groups had a naming requirement to say that if the last word in their status needs to be one of draft or final, so they can distinguish at a glance. So we have proposed, draft, CFI, draft, EFI, draft, testnet, draft, mainnet, final. So that way from one field, you could get both informations. Or you could require that they have every topic group have a final state, and their final state is final, and it might be final dash rejected, final dash implemented, final dash mainnet, and everything else is draft. I think with 2 fields, you're going to get too many conflicting states, because the topic group statuses really should map into this is either a draft state or a final state, and it's going to result in people messing it up. So maybe we could even in the there is no core status that the authors put on. It's something that the renderers put on when they render it onto the main page. So we could put the mapping inside of the logic that the sort of EIP logic that Panda's writing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we disagree here. I'm tired and there's lots of details. And that's part of why it's not in this document, is because there are details. Some of them are tooling details. Some of them are just my desire to somehow dissociate this as much as possible, so that the core devs and the editors do not need to coordinate on this stuff. And also that the IETF pretty much gets by with everything either being a draft or an internet standard. That's it from the publication.
But we vary significantly from the IETF. That's why I want to call these topic groups instead of working groups, because we don't do anything close to what an IETF working group does. We don't assign an editor. We don't assign a chair. We don't make the chair responsible for writing it. It's not a large group. So it's quite different already from IETF, which is why I prefer things like calling it a topic group, to make it clear that we're not confused with other processes.
Well, Google topic group and Google working group. Under topic group, you'll get nothing that makes any sense. Under working group, you'll get all kinds of different working groups and all kinds of organizations. Working groups are people who get together and organize themselves to get some work done. Topics are just anything you can talk about. The core devs are organized to work on a task. How they organize themselves is not the editor's concern. The editor's concern is just, is this a document that's still subject to change, or is it a document that is no longer subject to change? I think that's the only thing we care about. This is not a hard, it's not like I'm hard and fast on this. It's just a detail we sort of need to resolve. And mostly I think the editors can resolve it, but I don't want to be in the way of the core developers or mess up their process with this.
So I think we just provide a simple mapping, every topic group or working group, or whatever they call, just say this status maps to this status in the core draft final hierarchy, and then we can automate it with tools.
Something like that. Yeah.
Works for me. All right. I'm going to hop off. I have another call. Thanks for the
Okay.
good discussion on this. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
Sam,
Yep.
are you pretty sure you understood what Dano said? I'm too tired at this point.
My understanding is that Dano
was
wants
up-
to have. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was up working on ZK EVM stuff with a mathematician in Australia till 4 a.m. So
Sounds like a fun evening. But yeah, my understanding is that Dano wants to have a file somewhere that says, on the left-hand side, the name of the status, and on the right-hand side, a Boolean indicating whether it's a draft or a final. And then each working group defines that file.
that they can do what they want. Yeah.
Perfect.
So we'll get
Right.
into fine details of it maybe in the future meetings. But for today's, I think we are all on the same page. We are going ahead with this split and things are being sorted. Sam has dropped off. I don't know if there is any future call with respect to that proposal. If there would be, I'm hoping that announcement would be in the Discord channel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Have a good day.
Thank you.